In this video, we will be looking at the three main types of lipids that we have in our diets. The first of these, and the most prevalent or most common, is triacylglycerols. Glycerol is a sugar alcohol, so we need that for a triacylglycerol. And we also need three, hence three fatty acid groups. Fatty acids themselves are comprised of a carboxyl group, which we have right here, and a methyl group. Fatty acids, at least their chains, are going to be different from fat to fat. We need a minimum of 4 carbons in order to have a fatty acid. In this example here, we see we have 4 carbons. Now, because this is a short chain fatty acid, because we have the minimum amount of carbon, this is going to yield a low melting point. And because it's a low melting point, it's going to be more liquid in its state because it takes less heat or less energy to turn that fat into a liquid. Now, if this was a long chain of carbons, then that's going to indicate that it's going to be more solid in nature, or it's going to have a higher melting point because it takes more heat, more energy to turn that fat into a liquid. So again, what we're looking at here, this is going to be a liquid fat as opposed to a longer carbon chain, which will be more solid. With fatty acids, we have two different types. We have saturated and unsaturated. We're going to look these next few slides at some examples in order to differentiate at a molecular level what the difference is between saturated and unsaturated. The question that we need to ask ourselves when we are trying to figure out whether or not a fatty acid is saturated or unsaturated is, are all of the carbon atoms filled to capacity with hydrogen? We can see here, with exception to the carboxyl group, that all of the carbons are filled with hydrogen. In this case, then, we can say that yes, this fatty acid is saturated because they're all connected to hydrogen atoms. Now, looking at this one and asking the same question, the answer would be no. These are not all filled to capacity with hydrogen. In this case here, we see that this carbon and this carbon, they're attached to one hydrogen atom. However, they're also bonded to each other. There's a bond between these two carbon atoms. So because of this particular fatty acid, which is oleic acid, is going to be unsaturated because it is not saturated with hydrogen atoms. Now, there's also a difference between monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. In this case, we need to ask ourselves, since we've already determined that it's unsaturated, we now need to ask how many double bonds are there. In this case, again, this is oleic acid. We see that there is only one double bond. Because there's only one double bond, this means that the fatty acid is monounsaturated. This next one, this is linoleic acid. We see here that there's more than one double bond. In this case, there are two double bonds. Because of this, it is going to be a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now, a final term that we probably have heard is trans fat. So what do we mean when we are talking about trans fat? As we can see, these are both unsaturated fats. There's a connection or a linking between these two carbon atoms. So it's not filled to capacity with hydrogen, making it unsaturated. Naturally, we generally see fats in the cis fatty acid form or the spent form. Both of the hydrogens that are connected to this bonded carbon, these are both on the same sides of the structure. However, with trans fat, we see that one hydrogen atom is at the top, one hydrogen atom is at the bottom, which makes for a more straight molecular structure. Now, trans fats, these can be seen in nature. However, it's more likely that we are going to see these as a result of engineering fats through hydrogenation. We do have a video that talks about fat facts and fiction. I talk a little bit more about trans fat there as far as what it means for the food industry and for our health. So be sure to take a look at that. Purpose of this video is more so to see the molecular structures in all of these fats. The next main type of fat that we have is phospholipids. Phospholipids are a little different than triacylglycerols. We can see here that there's only 2 fatty acid chains compared to triacylglycerols, which have 3 fatty acid chains. In addition, we also have a phosphate group attached to the glycerol. This phosphate group allows for the fat molecule to be hydrophilic or water-loving. The fatty acid tails, these are hydrophobic, or in other words, they don't like water. Whereas the hydrophilic head, which has the phosphate group, this means that the fats are okay mixing with water. They're water loving. These phospholipids then are important when it comes to our cell membranes. It helps to protect the cell via the double layered cell membrane. So we have the hydrophilic heads at the top with the phosphate groups, and then we have the hydrophobic tails that are inside the membrane. This is a basic representation of a cell membrane. We'll also see proteins embedded within the cell membrane. And phospholipids, they're not just found in our body's cells. We can also find them in food products, and the purpose of them in food is to bind liquids that normally don't mix well together. So for instance, vinegar and oil, they don't naturally bond well together. They normally separate from one another. However, by including phospholipids, we're able to better blend those two, the vinegar and the oil, together. Our final fat group is sterols. As we can see here, molecularly speaking, these are the most different of the 3. We can see here that there's 4 carbon rings instead of carbon chains. Sterols are part of cholesterol. We do need cholesterol in our bodies. It helps with the formation of vitamin D, and it also helps in the production of sex hormones. Plant sterols are actually important in counteracting the damage that dietary cholesterol can have on the body. So dietary cholesterol from animal products, these do have health problems associated with them. They do contribute to poor health. However, with the cholesterol that comes from plants, this can actually help with the damage in our blood vessels caused by the animal cholesterol. And cholesterol, again, we need cholesterol in our bodies, but cholesterol only becomes a problem when it's in excess in the blood. So when we have too much cholesterol circulating through the blood, and then that ends up clogging our blood vessels. All right, so the 3 different types of fats, to reiterate, are triacylglycerols, phospholipids, and sterols.